welcome back to my channel. Now, this is something that I received in an email the other day that really just stuck out to me, and I've been obsessing over this case since I started researching on it. So that is the case of Reny. Now, this case doesn't have a lot of information to it. It's just kind of the theories that I came up with that I think, first of all, you guys are probably gonna think I'm crazy when I say them, but I feel like they're not so far-fetched. Now let's just go ahead and dive in right now and talk about what happened and his disappearance, and then we'll get into my crazy theory later. Now, Reny was 22 years old when he went missing on March 3rd, 2014 from Panama City Beach, Florida. He was incredibly intelligent and was due to graduate from Rice University just that following May after he disappeared. He went to school and was graduating with a 4.0 in mechanical engineering. He had big plans for his future. So when Reny disappeared was supposed to be a really exciting time for him. He had planned a trip with 22 of his fellow classmates for spring break to Panama City Beach. Now, they were all going to drive down there, have a great time, pretty much their last hurrah in college together, and then come back, finish up the next couple months, and they were going to part ways. They were all graduating for the most part. So it was a pretty important trip to everyone. They rented a beach house on the 21,000 block of Front Beach Road, and he seemed to be having a great time. He was sending pictures to his mom all on the drive there, was sending her pictures of the ocean when he got there. He called her a few times. He seemed happy, he seemed excited. I mean, what college kid wouldn't be excited to go on their very last spring break that they would pretty much ever go on? He even called his mom the day before he went missing and was talking about being so excited because he had a couple of interviews lined up for the week following his spring break. He was so excited about this. He thought he was going to immediately get a job, which is very, very rare for most people coming straight out of college. So he was so thrilled about this. He thought he was going to be able to jump straight into his career and start his life as an adult. However, on March 3rd at around 7 p.m., Reny went missing. He wasn't reported missing until the following day at around 11 a.m. by his friends. Now, this is where I've come across a few contradicting bits of information. According to some articles that I have read, his friends came across the trash can behind the house and noticed that Reny's phone and Reny's wallet, as well as the clothes he'd last been seen in, were stuffed inside the garbage can. And they apparently called police at around 11:30, so about 30 minutes afterwards. I've also seen other accounts where apparently the police were the ones to find them. I'm not really sure. I don't really think that bit of information is very crucial, but I just wanted to throw it out there that I saw very conflicting information on this when I was researching. But either way, his most important belongings were in the trash can behind the home, as well as the last bit of clothes he was seen in. So what exactly did that mean? His family wasn't told that he was reported missing until 3 p.m. the same day, and they immediately scheduled a flight to be out there the following day. By the time they got there, 16 friends had already left, which was a pretty big red flag for his family. You know, if you go on a big beach trip, 22 people, you're obviously all not the best of friends, but you're all pretty close acquaintances. If one of your friends goes missing, why would you all pack up and leave immediately? Now, the only 6 left were 4 of his roommates and 2 random girls. Now, I don't know how close they were to him. I don't know how close they were just in general, but according to their actions, they didn't seem to really care very much. Reny's parents at this point had pretty much no idea what was going on. You know, police were treating it as if he just walked off. They knew that's something he wouldn't do. The friends had left. They wanted to know what was happening, so they tried to ask the 6 remaining people. Now, the 2 girls absolutely refused to talk to them and instead thought it would be more important to go and grab some Starbucks, which I find the most disrespectful thing. And the 4 that did stay had very, very different stories. One person claimed to see him go on a walk, another person said that they were asleep, another person said they weren't even paying attention and didn't even see him that night, and then the 4th person said that he was out and had no idea what was going on. His parents were incredibly frustrated at this point because they had no one who would talk to them. Everyone who was talking to them was giving them very strange vibes and very strange stories, And again, it was pretty alarming that these 16 people didn't care enough to stay and, help them, tell them what exactly was happening, what he was doing before he disappeared, who he might have been with. So they asked the police if everyone had been questioned, and the police did tell them, yes, of course, we questioned everybody. We'll have transcripts later. However, when transcripts were finally provided, they didn't actually interview anyone until after the parents asked if anyone had been interviewed. So I think it was like the 5th or something, like a day after they asked. They didn't actually interview everybody. They pretty much interviewed everyone over the phone. So you can't really tell much from that. And the parents were extremely disappointed. And to make matters even more bizarre, all of the ones that didn't want to be interviewed, all the ones that left right away, for some reason immediately lawyered up. And as we've seen in other cases, that's never really a very good sign. That's when they got the one bit of information that the friends did share, the one little thing that might say what exactly happened to Reny that night. And unfortunately, it's not really anything very good. So apparently at 7 p.m. the night Reny went missing, he walked up to one of his friends on LSD and said, "I'm running away and I'm hurting myself." Now, this seems like a super weird statement to me, and I'll talk about it later, but this is all police really had to go by. This is all family had to go by, and they both took it very different ways. His parents said that he never suffered from any sort of mental health issues. They said he didn't drink, said he didn't take drugs, which would later be proven that that wasn't the case. They just didn't know that particular side of him. But his mother specifically said that whenever he would be struggling with something in life, he would always come to her and say, "Mom, I'm not a coward, okay? I will face things head on. This is life. Things are not going to be easy. I'll take it day to day. I will never give up." He was just the kind of person that when he was faced with something difficult, obviously he picked an extremely difficult career. He picked an extremely difficult, life path. Things were going to happen along the way, and he always took it head on and was fine. So she said there was absolutely no way and nothing in the world that would make him want to hurt himself. However, an interesting little bit of information that I heard when I was listening to the Thin Air podcast, which I will link down below, on Reny's disappearance, the person who runs that podcast interviewed the mother and this anonymous friend that was pretty close to Reny. Now, Reny apparently did do drugs, and he did a lot of them. So the fact that he was on LSD doesn't sound very out of character for him at first. Your first thought would be maybe he took something he wasn't used to, or maybe he was slipped something. However, when he did do drugs, according to her, LSD was one that he would not take. It was one he strayed very far away from. So this is something that alarmed her from the beginning when she heard of it. At this point, the family had to contact multiple New York politicians. That's where they lived. They lived in upstate New York. And they had to basically tell these politicians what was going on and do a press release to even get the police to start searching for Reny. Even with this information that he was last heard saying, "I'm on LSD, I'm gonna run away and hurt myself," they still wouldn't actually actively search for them. And interestingly enough, as soon as they did that, they really did jump on the search. Now, they ended up finding a pair of Reny's socks right on the beach in front of the house, which you guys can pretty much see at this point where this is all leaning towards. His clothes, phone, wallet were all in the trash can in the house. Right across the street was the beach where his socks were found. The next step to pretty much everyone, especially after what he said, would be that he walked into the ocean. And that's exactly how they treated it. Now, the police got a lot of different people involved. They sent divers, Coast Guard, they had helicopters, and they specifically said to the family, because of the way the ocean works, if he just walked in, there's no way he could swim far enough to where he would be too far away for us to find him. If he's somewhere in this water, it's going to be relatively close. So they expected to find him within 24 hours. However, 24 hours passed, he wasn't found anywhere. 48 hours passed, weeks passed, months passed, and then they went to the family and said, "Oh, well, maybe he was eaten by a shark." They had all these different excuses as to why something that shouldn't happen, which is him floating out completely to sea, did happen, and they couldn't find him. This is pretty much where everything ended. They just had these small bits of information and no friends involved that would talk to them about what happened that night. Every friend pretty much was lawyered up. No one would say anything. Reny's mother even tried to call and track down some of these people, and when they found out who she was, they would hang up on her. There's like nothing to this case. There is just no information, yet such bizarre circumstances. Unfortunately though, being the area that it was, it's such a tourist attraction and such a college spring break area. So every week during that time of year, things just kind of transitioned over into a new set of people. So all the people who might have been there that week and seen something or heard something were pretty much gone in different states. So no new tips came in. His family went the year anniversary after his disappearance and held a vigil. His family has been doing things nonstop, trying to get people to talk.
What we're going to do here today is we're going to hold a Honk for Reny campaign. And the Honk is a campaign that we hold for missing persons or victims where they were last seen or where the crime took place. And what we do is we hold up signs and encourage the drivers to honk, which makes a lot of noise and attention and lets everybody know, here, this is what we're working on right now, and this is what we need help for. So this is a great way to spread awareness and get attention for the case that we're looking for.
They have a Facebook page. They've got everything possible, because for something so bizarre and, you know, such a bizarre setup and timeline and way people reacted, you would think there'd be tips coming in, people would want to talk, but for some strange reason, that's just not how it is. So suicide obviously was what they assumed it was. However, when his sister went to his dorm room, she found all of his notes that he had ready to go for his interviews the next week. They were all written down on little bits of paper all over his table. He'd even planned it down to what he was going to wear. It seemed like someone who wanted to return home, someone who didn't have a plan to hurt themselves, but then again, LSD does very interesting things to people, especially if they were to have a bad trip. The friends have always been a dead end. However, now they really are, because all of them have graduated at this point within months of him disappearing, moved off to different parts of the United States, possibly out of country, so they're near impossible to get in touch with. There's literally nothing left besides his family fighting for answers on his disappearance. They are desperately trying to get the FBI involved, and their premise on this is that he grew up in New York City, went to college in Texas, disappeared in Florida. He was, you know, all stretched out from all these states. So they're hoping that that will get the FBI involved. So we're gonna go ahead now and get into the theories, because there's literally no more information left on this case. So the first theory is that he was overwhelmed and decided to run away or commit suicide. When it comes to running away, I think it definitely is a possibility. After all, he did tell his friends he was going to run away and hurt himself. However, exactly as he said, he was going to run away and hurt himself. Now, whether this meant just physically harming himself or killing himself, we don't really know, because he was very, very vague in the way that he worded it. He was finishing up school. He chose a pretty difficult career path. He was working very, very hard. He was very intelligent, but it was something that would require a lot, and it's very possible it just became a little bit overwhelming to him. My thoughts on this, you know, he moved away from New York, a place he was comfortable, to live in Texas, very far away from where his family was. He chose a really bold career. He was described as someone who did a lot of drugs, partied, drank a lot of alcohol, but still got immaculate grades in school. So to me, he seems like he can manage things and balance things pretty easily. So the thought of him getting overwhelmed seems less than likely. Then there's the possibility of suicide and the fact that drugs were involved. There's always the possibility that he could have been triggered into some onset of mental illness. However, again, he took drugs so often that the chance at this one particular time while he was by the ocean, you know, he was triggered into something and it immediately resulted in something bad happening, that's likely. However, I don't think it's very likely. And there's a possibility that he had a bad trip. And I'm going to tell a story that is not personal to me, but personal to someone else I know. LSD is serious. Like, LSD is very serious. And if you have a bad trip, horrible things can happen and you can literally be affected for the rest of your life. Now, a lot of people think, oh, he took LSD, you know, but he never had a history of wanting to kill himself. He never had a history of suicidal thoughts. Well, you don't necessarily need that. You can have a bad trip on LSD and kill yourself without ever having thought of that in your entire life. For instance, the story. There was someone who had a bad LSD trip, and they literally, I kid you not, I'm not making this up. I'm not saying this to be funny. This is incredibly serious, and I'm saying this hopefully to scare you guys into never taking it. This person on LSD, on a bad trip, thought they were a milkshake and that people were going to drink them. This is what this person thought, and it messed them up so bad that they disappeared for a while and then eventually killed themselves because of the flashbacks they had of thinking that they were a milkshake and someone was going to drink them. And as silly as that may sound in a sober mind, when you are on any sort of, you know, hallucinogen or, you know, something that changes your reality a little bit, that can be the most terrifying thing in the world. It's kind of like having a dream, you know, where your bad dreams don't seem scary and they seem silly like that when you're like fully aware. But to someone on LSD having a bad trip, that could be the most horrifying thing in the world. So that just goes to show someone who has no previous issues could all of a sudden have a terrible trip and kill themselves over it. It could explain why he threw his phone and his wallet in the trash can. Maybe he was paranoid and threw them away so no one could prove his identity. You really don't know. Like, the possibilities are endless when it comes to what is in your brain during a bad trip. At the same time, as someone on LSD, you know, if you were paranoid and you thought someone was coming after you, the chances that you were able to successfully get all of your clothes off and place everything into one trash can and not draw attention from anyone and then run across the street and do something, that makes it a little less likely. So we're going to talk a little bit more on him possibly running away. So he told his friends at 7 p.m. he was going to run away and harm himself. I looked back to see what the sunset time was on that particular day in their particular location, and the sun set at 5:44 p.m., meaning by the time he said this, it was already dark outside. Because my first thought, and a couple of other theories I have read, is how could this man, since he took his clothes off, run naked across a road and not be seen by anybody? I'm going to put up right here at the area, just vague location because I don't know which house it is, the place that they were staying. They weren't very close to anything. They weren't very close to hotels. They were in a quieter area. They were right across from the beach. And at nighttime, anytime after 7, he easily could have run across there and not be seen by someone. So now I'm going to kind of talk about my theory. So the entire time I was researching this, the one thing that kept popping up in my brain was, you know, his socks were found on the beach. He told his friend, in a very bizarre way, I'm going to run away and hurt myself, which I think is a very bizarre way of wording things, first of all. I feel like that sounds like something someone would say if they were uncomfortable completely with even the thought of killing themselves. It's very vague. I feel like if you were going to hurt yourself, you'd be kind of more specific, like, I'm going to kill myself, I'm going to do this, I'm going to stab myself, or I'm going to go drown myself. But he just said, I'm going to run away and hurt myself. Like, that sounds very forced and planned out. And then if you think about his phone and his wallet and the last clothes he was seen in being thrown away, my initial explanation for all of these things seeming so perfectly planned, like so perfectly set up to where it looks like he walked into the ocean and there is no other option. My first excuse was, well, obviously the friends did something to him. And then I started listening to the Thinner podcast and heard what one of his friends have to say, and I have a very different idea now. So this is the same friend that said that he partied all the time, did a lot of drugs, he never ever did LSD, but she said that they had this connection. Strictly platonic, nothing, you know, romantic, but at parties when they were, you know, in the same room, they would end up like off together talking about very serious and like philosophical things. And for some reason, every time they had a conversation, it would always get onto the topic of, well, is all of this worth it? Is all of this hard work and school and, you know, effort we're putting into this, because this school was literally just filled with geniuses, you know, is it all worth it? And his answer to this changed my entire outlook on this case. And his answer was, wouldn't it be nice to just leave, to just run away from it? He apparently was not happy with the decision he made to be a mechanical engineer. As I said before, he was a very philosophical person. He wanted to experience things. He wanted to explore. He wanted to learn different cultures, learn different things. He didn't want to just go to a humdrum job where he woke up in the morning, did a pretty average thing. Like, he felt incredibly pressured to be doing what he was doing, and he made it very obvious to her, to the point where she thinks it's possible he said it to many other people, that this wasn't how he wanted to be living, that he wanted to be doing something different, but he just felt so pressured into it. If this is true, you know, I'm sure while being on this vacation, he might have realized, or maybe he knew, that he needed to escape, that this wasn't what he wanted. He was months away from graduation, months away from having to do all these adult things in a field that he wasn't truly passionate about. So I find it very possible that he ran off. I know it's a lot of work to create a new identity, and apparently he didn't have a passport, he didn't have all these things he would need. You know, how would he, travel somewhere without it? But keep in mind, he was a very, very intelligent person. And now that I'm looking at things from the outside, it almost seems strategically planned by him. All of those letters that he left on his table made it look like he was planning on coming back. The way he worded to his friends, I am gonna run away and hurt myself. You know, it wasn't severe enough and as serious enough as I'm gonna kill myself, to the point where it would require immediate action. They easily could have just thought, oh, he's having a weird trip, like he's crazy, like he'll be fine. So it would be just enough to leave something behind afterwards, but not enough for anyone to really put immediate action in. The way his belongings were found, everything was just set up so perfectly. I think he's out there somewhere. I think he is out there alive somewhere. I think, that's why he was calling his mom all those times and sending her all of those pictures. I'm sure he knew what he was about to do. I'm sure he knew it would be easier to do it while he was off on vacation. Think about it. When you are going to commit suicide, if you are planning it to where everyone really thinks you probably died, whether your body is found or not, where's the easiest place to do that? In the ocean. I don't know, you guys. Like, I know a lot of my theories sometimes are crazy, and I don't mean any of them in a disrespectful way, but something is like pushing me towards this theory. Like, the more I dug in, I just knew from the beginning something was off. And then when I heard her say his one statement, I have this feeling in my gut that he's out there, that he wasn't happy and he ran. So let me know what you guys think about that. They actually ended up finding entries in one of his journals where he said he wanted to leave and go to Tibet to become a monk. I mean, he at this point had said multiple times in a journal or to a friend that he wanted to run away, like he wanted to experience something different. So why is it that far-fetched for police to believe that's what he did? Because they really zoned their search into the Gulf Coast. They swore he drowned. They didn't search really elsewhere. And to this day, they still stand by it, but then they go back and they say, oh, well, but at the same time, he would have turned up by now. We would have found him, or he would have washed up. So I feel like they're just doing the least amount of work possible and not exploring these other options, which I think are very, very likely. And that leads us into our next theory, which is that the friends might have had something to do with it. When I have gone to different forums and looked at what people's theories are for this case, this was probably the highest one. This is honestly, I think, the only one that I saw. Everyone pretty much thinks the way these friends acted, the fact that 16 of them went away, the fact that the 4 left, had different stories. 2 girls totally abandoned ship to Starbucks, just all these different things together. People think the friends might have had something to do with it. But I am not as taken back by their actions as a lot of people are. Think about it this way. There were probably a lot of drugs in this house, like a lot of drugs. And all of these students were incredibly intelligent, going to a very prestigious school to carry out very prestigious careers. That's not just something that you work for like a short period of time. Like, they literally got good grades since they first started school in order to make it to where they were. They've put their entire life so far into creating the life they're about to have outside of school. So all of the drugs they possibly had come with a felony charge. You can't continue that on with a felony charge. So the fact that 16 of them were like pieced out right as soon as he went missing does not surprise me. I think they knew there was going to be some sort of investigation, obviously, and unfortunately, young adults are probably the most selfish out of all human beings, and I am not that surprised that they just decided to let police figure it out and they covered their own butts. At the same time, there were 22 of them in the house. Now, I personally have been in a spring break house that had, I think it was like 17 people in it or something. You cannot possibly keep track of everyone. So the fact that a lot of people just didn't see him, you know, or they were doing different things at different times doesn't necessarily surprise me either. A lot of people are upset that it took so long for them to report him missing. But keep in mind, again, spring break. He could have met a girl, been off with a girl. Like, you don't really question it if one of your friends kind of disappears because you kind of assume you know what they're doing. So that as well doesn't really stick out to me. They did call, I'm assuming, around as soon as when they woke up and realized he never came home and they couldn't reach him. So I think they really did follow through with everything. They were just terrified for their own selves. They weren't worried about someone else that would probably turn up later. You know, maybe he just overslept somewhere at a house, or maybe, you know, he was serious about that LSD last night. Maybe he really did go off and, you know, fall somewhere in this drug-induced stupor. But then one thing that sets me back about the entire thing is that they lawyered up, and why didn't anyone do anything when Reny came up to them and was like, hey, I'm on LSD. I'm running away and hurting myself. Like, if you were of your right mind enough to hear that information, why would you not act on it? Like, even if, like, to me, if he was on LSD and someone said that to me, I would immediately think, you're having a bad trip. Like, you need to be watched more than anyone else because you need to come down from this. And, you know, there's no telling what you could do. So the fact that not a single person was alarmed by that, but at the same time, you know, spring break, selfish nature, college kids. Like, I feel like it's really just as easy as explaining it away to that. But at the same time, you know, maybe one of them gave him the LSD. Maybe one of them was worried because they gave him something that was messed up. It's very possible to be charged with manslaughter if you provide some sort of messed up drugs to somebody or drugs that kill somebody. There's just so many possibilities here, but I honestly don't think any of them did anything to Reny. I just think they're hiding possible small bits of information that could lead to more answers because they're terrified of getting into trouble. I know this was definitely a shorter case, but something in me just like swears he is out there. I know you guys are immediately in the comments gonna say his friends are so sketchy, his friends have something to do with it. And while I do think they know something for a fact, like they know more that may or may not be related, I don't think they had anything to do with it. I don't know, I've just got this weird vibe. So please take my theory with an open mind and really think about it. You know, we've got very little information here. This poor family is like begging for people to spread his story, for the FBI to get involved. And it's like, I feel terrible because I feel like their voices aren't being heard, which is why I wanted to do this story as soon as I possibly could and get it up, because I swear he's out there somewhere. I really honestly do. And I've had this feeling very few times when I've covered these cases. And this is probably the strongest I have ever felt about it. There are freak things that happen. He could have just drifted out further than they ever assumed he would, and they unfortunately didn't uncover him, you know, or was it all set up? Was it all set up by him? I don't know. Please share his missing persons poster everywhere that you can. Maybe if he is out there and he sees that people are talking about it, he will come home. There was a phone call made to his mom at some point, and I'm not even sure if they ever really figured out what happened, but someone called Reny's mom from a blocked number and said, I miss you, I want to come home. Now, we don't know if this is Reny. Maybe he realized he made a mistake and now he realized it's gotten too big. 22 friends are being blamed for it. There have been multiple politicians contacted. There's currently a petition page being signed for the FBI to get involved. Maybe he just realized it went too far. I hope either a friend comes forward and says something if they were involved, or they know more. Like, your life is important, but his life is important too. And unfortunately, his parents will never ever know what else will happen in his life. And if you've done something, you need to come forward 100%. If you know something, you need to come forward. You have to keep in mind how minuscule a lot of these things that you might have done, like drugs or whatever, at this point would be, and realize that there's a family out there still hurting. They are still suffering. They still don't know where their son is. You know, do the right thing and come forward. If you have seen him, if you know anything about this. If you just so happen to be at the same beach during spring break at that time, please think back in your memories. Please think back if you saw him, if there was anything weird, you know, anything that could possibly help this case. I will have all the contact numbers down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting all of these people that I cover and their families. Share this video as much as you possibly can to get the word out. This one really struck me when I read it, and I know you guys will do an amazing job at sharing it to as many people as you can. I personally think the FBI definitely needs to get involved. There's something more to this. Someone needs to force these people to sit down and say something. But give this video a big thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to become a member of the family, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.